And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the H.E.A.L people. Long-standing and well-established health disparities exist because of racial, colonial, ableist, geographic, economic, and gender inequalities. Heart-based education and anti-colonial learning, H.E.A.L Healthcare, believes arts and humanities have an unrealized potential to disrupt these inequities. On today's Open Connection, H.E.A.L team member Nicole Halbauer.
Amasa, hello. Achstam hanach da wayu, kitsam kalam di wilwadgu, genhada de pategu, wapgom. Hello, my name's Nicole Halbauer. My Smaliak name is Achstam hanach, which means victorious woman. I'm from the Raven clan of Kitsam Kalam of the Tsimshian Nation from the House of Gom.
As you were saying your name and telling me who you were in your language, it's almost a mirror image of H.E.A.L, is that right?
I believe so. I think H.E.A.L has been an amazing part of anti-colonial learning. Our HEARC team has been doing this since 2008 at UNBC's Northern Medical Program. And what they're doing is really creating, upholding, and safeguarding spaces for anti-colonial teachers, learners, and cultures.
Well, if this is wrong, then this is what will fix you. But that doesn't really have the whole picture of the person, right?
No, Robert, what we've really done in our modern society is that we have separated the rational and the emotional part of ourselves, which, as you know, once you start separating pieces of yourself, you become out of balance. And we focused on science as purely rational and removed the heart and the emotion and the art of science out of it. What the H.E.A.L project has done is said, no. To be a whole person, we need to add that art back in. We need to add that self-reflective, emotional response back into what we're doing so that those providing healthcare can continue on as whole beings, not as a rational machine, because human beings aren't machines. And we have art. And art is beautiful, and it is strange, and it is chaotic, but it is essential to our humanity. The humanness of us requires that we express ourselves through art. And when we only focus on the scientific, rational part, we become out of balance, and therefore we are not as able to create that empathetic, heartwarming experience for those we're trying to serve in H.E.A.L.
When we say the word heal, we mean a healing as the body, mind, and spirit. But it's an acronym. Is that the right word? So what does that stand for?
Oh, yeah. Dr. Sarah DeLeu and her team came up with this before I came on board. And it's hearts-based education and anti-colonial learning. And that is such an amazing concept that you're learning from your heart. And it's anti-colonial. So we're removing all those oppressive biases that we see so often in society today. You know, it's for all body types. It's for all skin colors. It's for all socioeconomic ranges. It's for all abilities. It's for everybody. It's completely inclusive. And we have projects from across Canada, from different cultures. We have everything from poetry and painting, equine body language, everything. We have several people from the Northwest here who made contributions themselves. We have one on Indigenous leadership. What does that really look like, from Christina Hansen. We have a children's book called Mayam Bin Ben by Ocean Georgian Amagodam Lachsulda from Kitsam Kalam. And in it, she writes a children's book so beautifully. But then the self-reflective art piece that the learner works through talks about her experiences in the emergency room here in Terrace. She has an Indigenous mother, she has a non-Indigenous father, and by about 10 or 11 years old, she had figured out really quickly what kind of treatment and access to services she would have depending on which parent she went with. So she was consistently choosing her father, even though that maybe wasn't necessarily the person she was most comfortable with or whatever. She wanted her mother, but she knew if her mother were to take her to emergency, she'd have a different experience. So the whole project is a wide, diverse group of artists telling their lived experience and helping the learner go through, okay, address your bias. What is your bias? Have you contributed to this kind of harm in some way? And are you ready to say, I'm done with that? I'm going to move on and create a more inclusive environment to my practice.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Under the section on the H.E.A.L healthcare website, you'll find a basket with the following explanation. In Tsimshian culture, a woven cedar basket is used to carry important names, knowledge, and cultural practices. Like this cedar basket, the strands of learning found within the H.E.A.L healthcare learning resource intersect and weave a pathway and experience unique to each individual. Let us return the conversation with Nicole.
We've wove it together like a basket. So we know cedar in itself is beautiful. Every strand of cedar on its own is beautiful. It's unique. Cedar is strong. It doesn't rot. It doesn't mold. And we have taken that and conceptualized the thought that one strand of cedar is great, but if many strands of cedar come together and weave in and out of each other and create a basket, then you have something that is so much more beautiful, acceptable, and can hold more. And that's really what we're thinking. So you can do, in one day, you can do a session, a program, a module from an Indian residential school survivor talking about his experience and how that impacted how he raised his children, and then how all of this work that we're doing has impacted how he reacts to his grandchildren. That's 30 minutes. You can use it as a journal club, a book club, in your classroom, as a workshop, however you need to use it to get this message across. I mean, every year, residential school survivors are asked by well-meaning teachers from classrooms, can you tell us these things? And you get asked a series of questions. And I've been asked these questions multiple times, and some of them are quite triggering and offensive without the child who's asking them knowing what they're doing. This curriculum can be for the teacher before those lessons come up in class to say, hold on, maybe sending kids out with those questions to ask residential school survivors is not that great, is not that kind. But here's a way to learn about it. Or the next thing you can do is you can create a sacred painting from an Anishinaabe woman, a two-spirit person in the prairies, and talk about, they give you a supplies list and walk you through the meaning of a sacred painting. Like you and I were talking about tattoos earlier. This person talks about what it's like, what it means, and how to create it. And then you're creating your own sacred painting and having that self-reflection of yourself. There's no order, however you feel. Today you want to write poetry. We have multiple modules on poetry. Dr. DeLayu's entire HEART team is absolutely incredible. Dr. DeLayu is actually from the area. She grew up in Haida, she says, but I knew her from Caledonia. And she has put together a team that is absolutely amazing. She has PhD students. She has mentees from Indigenous Black people of color. She has non-binary members. She has created an opening and welcoming space for anyone who wants to work in anti-oppressive learning. And she allows everyone on the team to figure out what it is that they're going to tackle, and she supports them to create amazing websites. We have one of our team members is doing clinical research in traditional midwifery. It's an amazing team that Dr. DeLayu has created.
Could you give me a little bit of background when it comes to those words like, to decolonize?
Well, we've grown up in a completely colonial construct, especially your and my generation, where there was a certain standard of beauty, there was a certain standard of wealth that many of us were excluded from because of our skin color, our genealogy, and our heritage. But those weren't originally our culture's measures of success and identity. Those were imposed upon us from people from other countries that came here and decided that our grandparents and great-grandparents needed to change their ways. And that has not been healthy for anyone in the country. So when we're talking about decolonizing and reconciliation and truth. We're talking about just like creating inclusive spaces for everybody to feel welcome, everybody to have their needs met, and everybody's diversity to be celebrated instead of denigrated.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Transformation can happen in many ways and in many different contexts, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and within society. It is often uncomfortable and filled with disruption and resistance, but it ultimately leads to greater growth. Let us return to the conversation as Nicole shares some more about the H.E.A.L healthcare team.
People who have come out of substance misuse on the downtown east side and what it took for them, what worked for them to be able to become healthy and begin the healing journey. They have since gone to found a nonprofit organization, Can Do with a K, in the downtown east side to help others. And so they have documented their journey of what it took to become healthy in that environment and have contributed that to the H.E.A.L program for others to learn from. So that you can talk about, okay, when your doctor says A, B, and C, then you just don't go back to that doctor, let alone do what they said. Or when you come up to a nurse who treats you poorly because you live in poverty, then you just don't go back to that doctor's office or that dentist's office or wherever that healthcare provider is. So this is all about, like, as the healthcare provider, are you sending those signals? Are you creating that environment where people don't want to come? And so these are people with lived experience saying, do you know what? I met this doctor who created a great environment, who understood why I was there, who understood the history of my family, the known history that we talk about, and was willing to help me. And so I continued to go back for help, and they continued to help me. And now I run a nonprofit. It was really fantastic for me to create a space and to guide a space through an anti-colonial process. Like, I didn't just say, hey, send me a 15-page proposal on what you want to do. Here's our timelines, and meet them. I had coffee with everybody multiple times. Many people didn't believe they had something to say to their healthcare professionals, that they had no story to tell. And I sat with them and I talked, and they said, actually, you know what? You're exactly what we're looking for. Bring your story. Tell me how you want to tell your story, and we will find a way to make it come true and put it on the website. And that's what we did. We really took people's lived experiences. We gave them the opportunity, and we helped them when they needed help. We offered that, and that was that's how we got here with 30 pieces of curriculum at this time, and it's really varied.
You hear a lot of times when it comes to residential school, when actually those truth and reconciliation hearings were happening, that was almost the spark that kind of lit for programs like H.E.A.L.
Yes, yeah. When we started talking about Indian residential schools as a society, as a culture, as a country, and we realized that this was true. And it was, people knew, kind of like we talk about the foster care system now. We all know the statistics for foster care children in care. But people back then knew they existed, but they had a different view of them. But when we started to talk about the truth part of it, what they were really like, and then we started hearing survivors' stories, and those were documented, that has made a huge shift in Canadian culture in what we find acceptable and valuable, and where we're going to put our energies and our efforts. And that's where we really start to hear where people are talking about, no, we need to decolonize these systems. We need to decolonize these thoughts. No, I'm sorry, but that standard is not an acceptable standard. Like in the 90s, one of my first jobs, I was so young, and I had this amazing mentor. I don't want to take that away from her, but it was the 90s, and I was a young Indigenous woman with long braids, and my mom had passed, and I had been given a pair of porcupine quill earrings by one of the elders in Kitsim-Kalem, and so I was proud to wear those back to work in Prince George. My boss told me that it wasn't a nightclub and my earrings were unprofessional, or my earrings were tacky. And then I got promoted to a management position. She says, Nicole, you're never going to get far if you don't do something about your hair. She says, your braids are very unprofessional. We need to change that. And I was like, well, I don't understand what this means. But she was, in her mind, helping me become professional so I could succeed more. But by becoming professional, it was erasing my identity and my culture and my heritage, which was the norm in the 90s, as you probably remember. If you wanted to be successful, you had to wear the suit and the tie. I was an Indigenous woman from a poor background. I already had 3 strikes against me. And she thought she was helping, but it crushed me. And that's how I got on this path of like, no, we need to be accepted for who we are. I don't need to become something I'm not to be successful.
You have a mass of resources and a lot of other people who specialize in the fields that they bring across. If you know, I guess you could say it's not just open to your website to the medical profession, it's open to everyone.
Everybody. It's free and open source, Robert. We wanted to make sure anybody who wanted to learn something about how to be anti-colonial had access to it. And it is free and open source. Anybody can go on it. Like I said, if you have a book club, take a look at it, because your next poetry reading, your next book, your next story could be on that website. And you don't know until you go take a look.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
While the appearance of your website is certainly important, most people aren't coming to your site to evaluate how slick the design is. They want to complete some action or to find some specific piece of information. In this final segment of Open Connection, Nicole shares how the H.E.A.L healthcare website guides the user to the information they require.
Michelle Roberge was a digitizer. Like, I can talk conceptualizing and bring people together and like do paperwork. Like when I started, I said, I can create you a great spreadsheet, but I'm not an artist. So they hired a digitizer. What the heck is a digitizer? And do you know how to create a website? I have no idea. But they found a visionary, Michelle Roberge. She works at a tiny office in Vanderhoof, and she is incredible. Every detail to the font, the colors, the way she digitized my cedar basket so that when you hover over things, all of that is Michelle Roberge's work, and it is all thought out. The team, every decision, the team was like, well, actually, I feel like that may not be the best decision. Actually, that hurts my eyes, or what? That's too bright, that's too big, that's too dark, that's too light. Everything, every word, every visual on that website was well thought out and was inclusive of the contributors as well, because each contributor has their own page. So we asked them some questions, and they sent in their bios and their descriptions of their projects and their photos to go with it. And then we showed it to them, and yeah, it was, everybody was involved. It was a very inclusive process.
You know, I was kind of looking at your website a little bit. There's some areas that I didn't think of. You know, ageism, of course, was one of them, but there was another one was weight. And I'm going, I never thought of that.
Yeah, fat phobia in the healthcare industry, especially for women, is a huge issue. Many women, when they have chronic health conditions, pain, whatever it is, when they go to their doctor, the first thing their doctor often says is, well, if you lose X amount of pounds, then that will not be so difficult for you. But it doesn't ever take into consideration a lot of the other, all of the other issues in a person's health, in their body, in their mind, in their spirit. And so you never get to, like, actually, the lady may have PCOS. She may have something else more chronic causing her not only the pain, but making it difficult to lose weight. Everything is on there. Do you remember the grandfather, and I think it was a granddaughter, that went to BMO to cash a check? They have a video on our, that UBC did, that is part of the website, and a lesson. Yeah, so there's everything on there. You name it. We have a full module on trans youth health care, and the importance in understanding, like 70% of non-binary trans queer youth attempt suicide, which is a staggering statistic. When you consider most Indigenous cultures two-spirit people, and we're just, every day, there is no stigmatism to it, but the stigmatism that was put on people during our history. And it's an amazing set of modules that it uses poetry to discuss the importance of providing safe, accessible healthcare to trans youth. And it's really important work.
You know, the magazines that you see just before you check out, and we were talking about weight and body image, and so much of that seems to be focused at women on what they look like and what they should look like. And they tell you how to be a better woman, a better sex partner, a better, how you can do all these other things. To be bombarded with that everywhere you look, of course, is going to take an effect on a person's psyche.
100%. And we don't address that in our wider society. But on our website, you can go on and you have it here. You have graphic medicine and patient understanding. There's about 2 or 3 on there, being trauma informed and providing better education. There's 2 or 3 on there that address specifically that. If you go to Devaney Cardinal's Ghost Pipe podcast, she has 10 amazing modules within her curricula that talk about a wide range of things, from tattoos and piercings and the value of them, to how to decolonize mental health for people, so that when they're coming with these images, and we are not all 5'7" and 105 pounds with blonde hair and blue eyes, or whatever, who's that famous family? Whatever that famous family has done to their bodies this week. We all can't go do that to be acceptable, right? So this is about the whole concept of decolonizing. Those are colonial constructs, Euro-ethnic standards of beauty. We were beautiful when colonization happened, and we are still beautiful today. And everyone is beautiful in every way. Their language is beautiful. Your body shape is beautiful. Your culture is beautiful. Your food is beautiful. All of it. We have one of the groups from the North created a cooking show. It's 3 generations of Filipino women, first Canadian, second generation, and third generation. All 3 women, healthcare providers. So I think it was a home care aide, nurse, and kinesiologist. I may be wrong about the first one. I know the third one's a kinesiologist because I know her, Carmela. And it talks about their experiences in the healthcare system in Canada. And that's really important information when you're talking about our society today, and you talk about what it's like to bring people to Canada to provide healthcare. What kind of an environment are we putting people in? If contributors felt comfortable, they have a section on each of their pages where they can put the resources that they found most helpful. So whether it was an academic research, a movie, a book, a piece of poetry, or a website that helped them, because remember, this is people's lived experience. They had to have an experience. And so how did they come through that experience? And they have these pages of resources, and it can be anything they want on there. And so, of course, there's always a link that if you need help right now, these are the pages that you can go to get help immediately.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.